It's the most wonderful time of the year and the perfect time for some fun DIY holiday sewing projects. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Madison, and here on YouTube I share my love for sewing with all of you, and I am so excited about this video. One, because it's Christmas time, which is literally my favorite time of the year, and also because this is my first Christmas holiday DIY sewing project video, and I am just so excited. I've always loved Christmas time and everything that comes with that, but over the past couple of years I haven't had a lot of time to dedicate my sewing time and skills to doing fun Christmas projects. But this year is different. This year I have time, and I, one, am making literally all of my Christmas projects this year, so more on that coming soon, and two, have been doing some fun Christmas sewing projects to kind of help add to my decoration collection. Hence the stocking here in the background, the one festiveness I have in my sewing room, which I really need to add some like Christmas decorations in here since I spend so much time in here, and whenever I'm in here I'm literally just watching Christmas movies these days while I'm sewing. But that brings me to the topic of today's video, which is showing you how to make your very own patchwork stocking from all of your fabric scraps. If you were anything like me, you have tons of fabric scraps and you hate to throw them away because you hate to waste fabric, and you want to figure out how you can use them because obviously you love the prints of those fabric, or maybe you have a vintage or antique fabrics that you have inherited from a grandmother. I want to show you how you can take all of those scraps and turn it into a fun Christmas project. Maybe you need a new stocking, maybe you want to up your Christmas decorations with your own personal flair, or maybe you want a fun homemade gift to give someone. Well, today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable, fun and easy patchwork stocking. You can put your own spin on it, use up all of your fabric scraps, and easily get into the festive spirit. And while we're on the topic of Christmas stockings, maybe you are in need of some fun, unique Christmas gifts, or maybe even some stocking stuffers, and I have got you covered. If you are looking for a unique, high quality and very fashionable gift for a friend or family member, I highly encourage you to check out Ana Luisa jewelry. I have been wearing the jewelry literally non-stop, and their jewelry really is the perfect gift to drop into someone's stocking or to wrap up and put under the Christmas tree. Their jewelry is hypoallergenic, non-tarnish, they have warranties on their jewelry, and they're currently running a 35% off sale. Not to mention that their jewelry is absolutely what you're looking for if you are someone who loves unique, classic, and also trendy and stylish pieces. So if you've been trying to figure out what to get your friends and family and they love fashion and jewelry, check out Ana Luisa jewelry. All the details are in the description of this video. Don't miss their 35% off sale going on right now, and stock up on unique jewelry pieces to gift all of the special people in your life this Christmas. Without further ado, let's dive into this fun Christmas DIY. Alright, so this is our patchwork stocking that we are going to be making in today's video. This was the mock-up that I originally did to work out all of the logistics for the pattern. So now I'm going to show you how you can very easily create the stocking for yourself and make your pattern for yourself. So first you're going to need to create your pattern. I simply made my pattern by drawing my kind of vision of the shape of a stocking, which is essentially two lines, and then I drew the curves for the foot of my stocking. However, if you already have a stocking laying around, all you need to do is just lay it on a piece of paper and trace it out, and then add about 1/2 inch of seam allowance.
So if you have a Christmas stocking laying around, the easiest thing to do is just grab that and trace around it. I will also link a free Christmas stocking pattern below if you want to use that. After I trace my Christmas stocking with a pencil, I'm going to go clean up those lines using a ruler and a Sharpie so that the lines are more distinct and that they are all nice and even. Then I'm also going to go in and add all of my seam allowance. You could add 1/2 inch of seam allowance if you want to sew on a 1/2 inch seam allowance line, but I am just going to add in a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For any patterns I make, I always add a label for the pattern, and then I also give instructions of how many pieces to cut, in addition to any pattern markings I might want. Then we're going to cut out that stocking piece that we just created and move on from there.
Alright, now that we have our base stocking, we are going to trace that pattern that we just created to make a second stocking pattern. That is going to be the version that we create our patchwork design with and cut up. We need one that's fully formed, fully still together, not cut up, for our lining and the back of our stocking.
So in total, we are going to create 2 stocking patterns. One of them is going to be cut up and one of them is going to stay intact.
All right, now that we have our second pattern, we are going to create our patchwork design. Now this is completely up to you of how many pieces you want to create, how big you want them to be, how patchworky you want it to be. My original design was very geometric, so I had a lot of kind of triangular shapes. If you want to just do rectangles or stripes, you can. So that is very easy to adapt this to fit whatever design you would like. You could do diagonal stripes, you could do crossway stripes, you could divide it up and make a lot of squares, but I like the haphazard look, so that's what we're gonna go with. So we're just gonna go through and we're gonna start creating different lines and cutting them up. However, I do want to point something out real quick. I traced this stocking. My stocking is pointed to the left, which is not that big of a deal. However, my original stocking that I made is pointed to the right, and I want these stockings to be a matching pair. So I'm actually going to cut this pattern piece out and flip it over to create my patchwork design before I cut it out, so that when I sew it together, all my stockings are facing the correct direction.
So this is the part where you have a lot of freedom in deciding what kind of patchwork design you want to create, what shapes you want to use, how many pieces you want to have. It's all up to you. You're just going to draw all of those lines, and each of them are going to become their own pattern piece.
All right, now that we have our patchwork design all gridded out, I'm actually gonna go through and number every single one of these. I found that when I was creating my mock-up, having them numbered helped me actually configure all the pieces together, kind of like a puzzle, because there's a lot of pieces and some of them are really small. I'm also going to put notches where the pattern pieces should match up, and again, this kind of turns it into a puzzle where it's easy to actually match the pieces up and construct it together as we are sewing it.
And before you cut out all of your patchwork pieces, you're definitely going to want to go through and number them kind of like a puzzle, and then also put notches so that you know which pieces connect to each other.
All right, now we have all of our pattern pieces cut out. Now it is time to connect these pattern pieces with the different prints of fabric that we want to use to make our patchwork stocking. All right, these are all of the scrap fabric pieces that I went to use to create my patchwork design of my stocking. I'm kind of going with a red, pink, brown, green, and maroon kind of vibe. I think I might need to add a couple more greens. We shall see. But now it's kind of just up to the creative part of figuring out what prints you want together and which pieces of our stocking we want to represent every different pattern. So now we simply choose the fabric we want to use for all of the different pieces. Something to keep in mind is that when we cut our pattern pieces out of our fabric, we are actually going to have to add seam allowance. Since we're going to be sewing these all together, we want to make sure that when we sew them together, we still get a size of stocking that is very close in size and shape to the original stocking that we made, which is going to be the pattern piece used for the lining and for the back of the stocking. So in order to do that, we have to make sure that when we cut these out, we add seam allowance. I'm going to be using a small seam allowance on this stocking, so we are going to be using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to sew all of these pieces together. So when I pin them to my fabric, I'm simply going to add 1/4 of an inch seam allowance.
Now you will simply pin your patchwork pattern pieces to the various prints and colors of fabric, and make sure to cut them with an added 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around.
All right, so we have all of our crazy patchwork pieces cut out of our fabric, and now it's time to sew it together. I found that when I was doing the mock-up for this, it is easiest to just work from 1 to the highest number that you put on your pattern pieces and to kind of go in rows. So this is Miss Darcy, our sewing assistant. Okay, so again, I'm going to start from 1 to 2. I'm going to sew these 2 together, attach it to number 4, then that whole piece is going to get attached to 3. Then that whole section is going to get attached to these 2, and then that trunk gets sewn to here. Then we're gonna sew these 2 together and sew it to that. So you just continue to add on and add on. That's why I really like the notches, because it helps me attach them together and remember what's supposed to go together. And then the numbers also help me with the order. It's gonna get a little crazy down here, but we're gonna make it work.
So now we're just going to start attaching all of those pieces together, working from number 1 up to the highest number, and we're going to be using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance.
Next, we're gonna do 5 and 6 together. Now we can attach 4 to 5 and 6. I don't want to spend the time of pressing all of the seams over at the iron, so I'm just gonna finger press them. And then I'm going to match up the notches that need to be matched up. You can pin it if you want. I'm not going to. I'm just gonna stick it straight under and sew it on 1/4 of an inch. Now these are connected so we can attach number 3 over here to the side. So again, we're just gonna finger press this open, match up our notch, and then sew it. All right, now that we have this block and section sewn together, we can attach it to the 2 original pieces by matching up the notches that we put. We're just going to continue all of those same steps through the rest of our stocking. So your patchwork pattern might look different than mine, but as long as you have them numbered and as long as you put the notches, you're essentially just going to assemble a puzzle in the order that they should go in. And if you ever get confused, just lay out all of your paper patchwork pattern pieces on a flat surface and compare your sewn patchwork stocking to those pieces to figure out where things are supposed to go. So I have the top 1/4 of my stocking. I'm just going to continue through with all of my numbers, all of my notches, adding on to this. Alright, so we have all of our patchwork pieces sewn together, and this is what it looks like now. It looked like a crazy work of puzzle pieces before, and now it has come together, and I'm obsessed with the colors. And yes, we have our little sewing friend here, Miss Darcy. So now that this is all sewn together, I just want to make sure and check the shape with my pattern. Remember, we kept one pattern that was fully intact. Don't worry about the fact that the toe is facing this direction. It's very easy to just flip over, which is what we're going to do here, and just double check and make sure that everything lines up. Now, one thing is the top is a little bit short, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about it too much. We do though want to trim down these edges so that they're nice and straight, since the original pattern already had seam allowance added to it and built into it. We want to make sure that the patchwork stocking is as close to this original as possible. Alright, these are all of the pieces you should have now for your stockings. We have the outer part of our stocking, which is all of the patchwork pieces that we sewed together. Then using our still fully intact stocking pattern piece, we cut out the back of our stocking. You want to make sure that those are facing the same direction. So if there's a right side, make sure you're paying attention to that. We cut out 2 pieces of batting. I like to use the 100% cotton quilt batting, but you could also use the synthetic. And then we have our lining pieces. So again, those are cut out of the all one piece stocking pattern piece. Now we are going to do the actual kind of quilting part, which is taking our patchwork stocking piece. We're going to place it onto one of our batting pieces, like so, and then we are going to take the back of our stocking and place it onto the other batting piece. Now, right now, we actually want the back of our stocking to be facing the opposite direction of the front of our stocking. The reason for this is that when we sew it together, we'd be sewing it right sides together like this, so we actually need them to be facing opposite directions right now so that they can actually be right sides together. So these are placed on top of the batting, and now we're just going to quilt these, and the method for quilting is completely up to you. On the back, you could do vertical up and down, you could do side to side, or you could do diagonal. I'm going to quilt it diagonally. The width between your stitches is completely up to you. I'm going to do about 1.5 inches, and I kind of eyeball this, but if you wanted to, you could go and measure out lines and actually draw them in, but I want to save some time, so we're just going to kind of wing it as we go. Now for the main side of our stocking, we obviously have all of our patchwork pieces. You could do a vertical side to side or diagonal quilting stitch for this piece, but I want my seams to be as unnoticeable as possible for the outside of my stocking, so I'm actually just going to quilt where all of my stitches already are by using a stitch in the ditch method. Essentially, it is running a stitch over seams that already exist so that your stitches kind of get hidden in the ditch and the crevice of the seams that already are there. Now, I'm not actually going to sew on every single one of these seams. So for example, some of my smaller pieces, I'm not actually going to quilt around those. I would quilt the longer edges, and I tried to do it as a seam that goes continuously and I don't have to have a lot of starting and stopping.
Attaching the patchwork side of my stocking to my quilt batting, I'm going to use the stitch in the ditch method, which is essentially where you take your stitch or your seam and it's going to go right over where various pieces of fabric are connected together so that the seam is essentially hidden in the crevice and the ditch of those seams. I'm just going to follow all of my seams to create my quilted pattern on my quilt side of my stocking, pivoting at different corners and at curves. Again, to save myself time, I tried to do this as continuously as possible where I had the least amount of starting and stopping. That's why I tried to pivot at every corner and sew around different curves of the stocking so that it was a continuous seam. Keeping with the idea of a continuous seam, I applied that same method to the back of my stocking when quilting that fabric together with the batting. I decided to go with a diagonal quilting pattern, and my seams were about 1 inch apart. You have total freedom in deciding how you want to quilt these pieces together. You can even draw lines. I just decided to eyeball this because it's the back of my stocking and I wanted to save time.
Alright, so we have quilted our 2 stockings. This one, again, you can see it's very unnoticeable because I stitched in the ditch for most of these lines. And then this is the back of our stocking. I just did diagonal lines. Next up, we need to attach our lining pieces to the outer parts of our stocking. So we have our 2 lining pieces, and all we're going to do is place them right sides together on both of our outer pieces. So we're going to place a lining piece right sides together on the back of our stocking. We're going to pin up here and sew just that. We need to do that so that it can flip up and we can sew the rest of our stocking right sides together. We're going to pin and sew a straight line along the top, and we're going to sew that on 1/4 of an inch seam allowance.
After each lining piece is attached to the outer part of a stocking, we are going to open them up opposite on a table, and then we are going to place them right sides together. So my red quilt batting back of my stocking is going to be placed right sides together with my quilted side of my stocking. I'm going to match up those center seams, which are the top of my stocking, pin them, and then just pin all the way around my stocking pieces. Again, you want to keep them open. We also want to leave about a 5-inch opening on our lining side, and then we're going to sew everything else together with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Since our stocking has a lot of curved edges, we want to go in with the clipping method, which is where we clip those curves of our stocking. This is going to help all of those curves lay nice and flat once we turn our stocking inside out. My clips are about 1 inch apart. And this is now where we go into that 5-inch opening that we left in the lining of our stocking. That hole is going to allow us to flip our stocking right side out. So this is kind of the magic trick of the stocking, is just flipping it right side out using the opening that we left. And then we're going to kind of flatten out and smooth out all of those curves and then press our stocking so that our seams are really nice. Then we're going to go in and sew that opening closed before we stuff our lining into our stocking. And this is what your stocking should look like now. The last step is to create a loop for our stocking. If you have access to any kind of ribbon, you could easily create your loop with ribbon. I just took a piece of fabric that was about 1 1/4 inches wide and about kind of 8 inches long, really however long and large you want your loop to be. I folded in those edges at 1/4 of an inch on both sides, and then I folded that piece of fabric in half and then just ran a stitch down the side to hold it all together. Then I'm going to take that loop and fold it in half, and then that's going to be sewn into the corner top edge of my stocking to create the loop so that I can hang it up. As you can see, I folded the ends of that loop under so that I would actually sew over them so that there wouldn't be any raw edges and that it would be a lot more sturdy. So this is me pinning it along that kind of side seam of my stocking, and then we're just going to sew 2 different stitches, one along the top to hold that loop in place and make it hang really evenly and straight, and then we're going to sew another stitch along the bottom of that loop for stability. And here's what the loop looks like now. And here's the finished stocking in all of its wonderful, fun, and creative patchwork glory. And then the back quilted part. I love how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed this festive Christmas sewing tutorial, and I hope that you give these fun patchwork stockings a try. It's the perfect way to use up those scraps that have been laying around, creating a pile forever. And remember, there's so much freedom in the patchwork pattern you create, the patterns of fabric you use, and all of the colors that you incorporate together. This is the perfect project to add something handmade to your own Christmas decorations or to give as a gift to someone special. If you try out this project for yourself, please tag me so that I can see your version of the patchwork Christmas stocking. And as always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to my channel to stay updated on new videos coming out in the future. Merry Christmas!